Hello.
Hello.
I'm Anya Rajan from the Instapreneurship Campaign, and here we have a really cool special guest, Tony Hsieh, and he's the CEO of Zappos.com. So, if you'd like to give yourself a little introduction.
My name is Tony. I live in downtown Vegas. We're actually here at Ferguson's, the residential airstream park in downtown Vegas, which is just a few blocks away from Container Park. And Zappos is about a 15-minute walk from here. And then also I'm involved with the Downtown Project, and there's a whole bunch of different restaurants and bars and retailers and so on that are all within walking distance of you.
Cool. So, in your day-to-day activities as the CEO, and also you're part of other projects, what do you do?
I think it really varies. That's part of what I like about what I do, is that it's not the same thing every day. It's really just about wherever I feel like my time is best spent to help the various projects I'm involved in. I guess the only consistent thing is probably spend at least 3 to 4 hours a day on email, just because that seems to be the most efficient way of communication, and it's hard to get it when schedules line.
Yeah. All right, cool. How old are you when you really started your entrepreneurial experience?
I think I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. I guess, probably thought about it for as long as I can remember, but probably in middle school was when I first started with a paper route and a mail order business at the time, selling. People would send in these photos, and I would turn them into these pin-on buttons and then send them back.
That's cool. I know that you did a worm farm sort of thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the idea was to grow worms and then sell them to, I don't know, fishermen or
whoever wants worms, I guess.
That didn't get very far. I bought a bunch of worms and then checked on them a month later. They were all gone.
Okay. Well, it was a start, so why did you choose to become part of a company like Zappos, like clothing and shoes, rather than any type of other one?
Yeah, because I'm not actually that interested in clothing or shoes, but I am interested in passionate about customer service and company culture. And so at the time, we were investing in a bunch of different internet companies, and Zappos just happened to be one of them. And decided that Zappos was both the most interesting, most promising, and also the most, that I enjoyed the people there the most.
Yeah.
And so that's why I originally joined them.
That's Zappos. Okay, I think we have a question. This is like where it doesn't really get efficient to read it like this. But how did Amazon buying your company affect business and how your company functions?
How did Amazon? So I think Zappos is pretty different from most other acquisitions that Amazon has done. We were acquired back in 2009, but as a precondition to it, we agreed that Zappos would remain independent, and we basically treat Amazon like our board of directors.
Right.
And so I think, as I understand it, most other companies they've acquired eventually kind of join the mothership and then kind of meld in with the culture at Amazon. But I think if you ask anyone that visits our campus and then visits Amazon, they'll agree that our culture is very different from Amazon's.
Okay, that I've also heard as well. Checking for any more questions? No. All right, then we'll move on to the next question that I have. All right. What does it mean to you to be an entrepreneur, and how would you define it?
So, I don't know if have you ever heard of the show MacGyver?
No.
Have you never heard of it?
I've heard of
Okay,
it, I just don't know what it is.
Okay, so when I was much younger, in middle school, there was a show called MacGyver, and he would basically always be in these situations. He was some sort of agent or something, and he would be in these situations where there were bad guys and he'd be trapped, and he never used a gun, and so he would have to be just looking around to see how to get out of a sticky situation. So he might put together like duct tape and I'm just looking around the room, and a coat hanger, and then some chemicals that he found, and then he would create this airplane or a bomb or something, and then save himself and also save the world in the process, and the bad guys would lose. And so he never had exactly the ideal resources, but he was always very resourceful and creative, and so and never knew exactly how you would get out of a situation, but through his creativity, you always knew that by the end of the episode, he would figure it out and save the world. And so, for me, entrepreneurship is kind of the same thing. It's getting to play MacGyver, but for business, you get to be creative. It's not following steps 1 through 10, and it's about not having all the resources or people or money or whatever that you need, but figuring out how to creatively come up with solutions and move the company forward.
That's really cool. I didn't consider it that way. So I think we have another question. Cool. I think the volume is kind of bad, but okay. Here we go. What would you consider to be the most important factor to consider for teens and young adults attempting to start a business?
I think the most important thing would be just to not worry about failure and just get experience. And so either from joining a small business or startup or just trying stuff out. And there's this idea of 10,000 hours of practice that Malcolm Gladwell talks about in, I forget which book, Outliers, I think?
Yeah, Outliers.
And so if you want to be a great musician, you just need 10,000 hours of practice, or a tennis player, or whatever. And so I think the same thing is true for entrepreneurship. If you just have 10,000 hours of practice where you're learning during those 10,000 hours and not just doing the same thing over and over again, then I think that's the most important thing. And so it's more just about racking up your 10,000 hours and getting started rather than trying to think of the perfect idea or the perfect anything. Because even if the specific ideas fail, that's okay. It's just part of your 10,000 hours of practice. Just like when you first try to play tennis or you first try to play piano or whatever, you're not expecting, oh, you missed a ball, therefore you suck. It is just part of the learning process.
That's fair. All right. Let's see. I think we have another question, and also we'll adjust the volume real quick just to make sure everyone can hear. All right. So next question. I'm gonna do this. We're students of homework in a cafe watching you live from our class in Dallas. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. It says. I think the volume should be okay now. Okay. I want to see another question that we can touch on that kind of ties into what we were talking about. How did you gain your initial funding? This is what I talked about in my first Instagram Live. How did you gain your initial funding? Like partners, your own money?
For me, I started out with the paper route, so it was my own money that I saved up, and I think these days a lot of the stuff is actually free or super cheap. Like I can't imagine 10 years ago, 20 years ago being able to just start broadcasting live, or I'm assuming this is free. And
yes,
so,
it's free.
Right, and so you can, here you already have, this is one platform, there's lots of different platforms where if you're doing interesting stuff that's relevant or useful to other people, then you can kind of build up a following over time. But in terms of authentic followers, actually one thing I'd suggest you Google is Google 1,000 True Fans. Okay. And I forget if it's Seth Godin or someone else wrote it, but basically it's this concept of all you need to be an entrepreneur and that's sustainable is find something that you're really passionate about and find your 1,000 true fans that are willing to pay for it, and that's all you need.
Okay. All right, that's perfect advice. Let's see if there's any more questions right now. No, they're not. Just more people joining, which is even better. All right, so what are your top 3 skills or attributes that you would describe an entrepreneur with?
Actually, there was research done on this, and they found the great entrepreneurs had 3 I guess, personality traits that they over-index for compared to the regular human population. And first was being comfortable with ambiguity. Second was strong sense of curiosity. And the third, which was not as over-indexed as the first two, but still over-indexed compared to the regular population, was emotional intelligence.
Okay. All right,
So-
perfect. So this kind of ties into like nature versus nurture. Like if you were like born with this talent, like born a leader, or like something you gain over time, what would you say between those aspects? Like what's something you're kind of that you could nurture and something you're kind of born with?
I think it's probably both. It's like those things I just mentioned, being comfortable with ambiguity and strong sense of curiosity and emotional tolerance. I'm sure that in general people are born within a spectrum, but then the more, like anything else, the more you practice something, the better you'll be at it.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions? I know you talked about failure and how you should be okay with that, but what are other pieces of advice that you wish you had when you were younger as a high school student?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's not just so much that you should be. I actually don't really. I think there's other phrases that you hear out there, like fail fast and all that. I don't actually. I think it's just the wrong framing. So it's not so much about being okay with failure. It's just like when you first learn to play piano or play tennis, when you miss a ball, like that's not failure. That's just normal.
Yeah.
Right? It would be weird if you never
Missed the ball.
or
Yeah.
hit every note. So I think it's just the wrong framing. It's more you just want to get your hours of learning and practice it.
All right. And that's what is that a guidance kind of that you wish you had when you were in high school, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, especially for school, I think a lot of school systems, it's about passing tests or right or wrong and so on, and a lot of that is not. I mean, I think that way of education can actually be detrimental to people's confidence and ability to go experiment and try out new things, when entrepreneurship, a big part of it is about experimentation and learning from that, whereas I think a lot of our schools' education structures are about how do you get the right answers on the test, and there's only one right answer, and that's not the case in entrepreneurship. So I think a lot of, I mean, there are not. This is not true for all schools. I've heard and known somewhere it's about project-based learning and encouraging creativity and learning teamwork and so on. So I think those are probably much more effective for learning life skills in general.
I totally agree with that. I think we have another question, which is also, we have multiple questions. Okay. I'm going to do this so I can actually read it. For a teen starting a business, would you consider an online retail market or traditional sales to be more effective in terms of customer outreach, customer service, and potential revenue?
So I think in general, I'll get random business idea questions. People will say, "Oh, what do you think of this idea versus this idea?" And the truth is, it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is whether there's actually customers for it, and you just won't know till you actually do the experiment. And so there's a great book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries that really talks about this whole idea of doing very cheap, he calls them MVPs, which stands for minimal viable products. And so, for example, he tells a story of he was at a company where they spent, I don't remember how long it was, maybe it was months or years even, building this complicated software product.
Yeah.
And then, because they thought they knew what the best design was and so on, so spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars doing it. And then they launched it, and they found out that no one was interested. No one even clicked the button to say they wanted to download the software or anything. So they basically just wasted all that time and all that money doing something that no one was interested in. And so a very cheap MVP they could have done is just create a website that says download it, and then even though they had, without creating it first, and then just see how many people click on it.
Yeah.
And they could have done that overnight versus waiting 2 years to make that same exact page. So for that specific question, I would think that how do you create how do you find out what customers actually want, and how do you do it cheaply rather than saying, oh, this is the business I'm going to go into, or this is the business that I'm going to go into. And so the book talks about that concept, and so I'd suggest maybe reading that book first to help with that answer.
What's the name of the book again?
The Lean Startup, Lean Startup.
Got it. The Lean Startup. All right. I have another question. Tell us about one of your most coachable or learning moments, and what did you take away from it?
Most coachable or learning moments? I'm not sure exactly.
I think it's like maybe something to do with failure, or like something that you learned from it, some experience that you got something out of.
Yeah, well, so for my prior startup, Link Exchange, which was, I co-founded it with a college roommate in 1996. We ended up selling that company in 1998, but the reason we sold it was because it ended up just not being a fun place to work at anymore. And the company culture it was a lot of fun in the beginning, and then it just went completely downhill. Yeah. And so when I got involved with Zappos, that's a big part of the reason why we pay so much attention to company culture, because I didn't want to make that same mistake again. So I think I'd say in general, make sure that you're always paying attention to company culture. And don't let it just happen, because if you just let it just happen, then if no one's really trying to manage it, and we try to make it something that all of our employees care about, then it can go away very easily.
Well, perfect. I think that's what she was trying to ask. So we have another question right here. What has been your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it? So it's kind of touching on the idea that you're...
Yeah, so we can go with that example, or I'd say at Zappos in general, the biggest category of mistakes we've made has been in hiring. And so and I don't think you'll ever get hiring perfect, but if you add up the cost of all the bad hires we made, the cost of the bad hires that those bad hires then made, and the cost of their mistakes and bad decisions, that's probably over our history cost us well over $100 million. And so, I know there's always a tendency to, especially as you're getting started, to want to hire faster and as quickly as possible because there's so many things to do. And I would just say, just make sure, like, if you have any doubts about hiring someone from a culture perspective, then just don't hire, because I'd say 99.9% of the time your instincts are right in that regard.
Alright, awesome. Let's see if we have any more questions. We don't right now, so I guess we can move on to some that I have. Alright, this is what I touched on yesterday too. So does an entrepreneur necessarily mean starting your own company, or do you find entrepreneurs within bigger, like larger companies?
Well, I think you can find the entrepreneurial mindset anywhere, and the way I would think about it is, no matter if you already have a job, that whoever your manager or boss is, instead of thinking of them as your manager or boss, think of them as your customer, and then just think about what are creative ways to make your customer happy, even if it's not part of your job description, because a lot of times the customer doesn't necessarily know what they want till they get it, and it may be, and don't narrow yourself into specifically what is within your job description. just if you see an opportunity to make the customer happy or to wow the customer, then just do it.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the simplistic way to do it. Just no matter what your structure of the company is.
Yeah.
So at Zappos, we're actually making a transition where we have right now about 1,500 employees and about 500 teams or circles, and we call them circles, and employees can belong to multiple teams, and we're actually in the process of transitioning each of those circles so that it's its own mini startup or micro business, and
cool.
to really get more of that entrepreneurial mindset within Zappos.
That's awesome. And do you think you did that because of your own entrepreneurial experiences, or is that the collective?
It's more just, I think, as companies get bigger under the traditional hierarchy, I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just what happens with that structure, that there's more bureaucracy and more layers, and it's just harder to get stuff done and so on. And so this was just knowing that Zappos is going to continue to grow. So at some point we're going to outgrow the traditional structure and wanting to do something that was more, something that we knew in the long term would allow us to continue to be not just as innovative, but actually more innovative as we grow bigger. And most companies actually become less innovative as they grow bigger. But there are actually examples already of human structures where as they get bigger, they become more innovative and more productive. And that example is actually in cities, where if you look at the research of cities, every time the size of a city doubles, innovation and productivity per resident increases by 15%. Whereas with companies, as they get bigger, generally you get the opposite effect. So we're trying to almost create like a mini city within the four walls of Zappos.
It's really cool. Good idea. I think we have a couple more questions. We have them right here. Awesome. Okay. What made you believe that being an entrepreneur was the right decision for yourself, and how were you able to get to that?
I don't know if it was really, I don't know if it was really a decision, more just something that I just wanted to, I guess in thinking back on it, it was probably more just doing lots of either side projects or hobbies, and really I just thought of them as just that. It was just a side project or a hobby that I was interested in doing, and then maybe they just got bigger over time.
Awesome. I'm gonna check the time, make sure we have, wow, it's 4:30 already. That happened really fast. Well, probably a lot to do with the technical difficulties. That wasn't really a difficulty in the beginning. So, alright, I think that's about it. That's what we have time for. So, I'm gonna check if there's any more questions. Nope, that's it. Well, I want to finish off with one question. What is Marley's role in your life? And for background, that's his llama.
Or alpaca.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, maybe you can take this live stream outside when I say bye.
Yeah, I think I might just take it. Yeah.
I think when they see Marley the alpaca, you'll understand, or they'll understand. For those that have never seen a llama or alpaca in real life, they're just very strange animals. But they're super curious, and kind of can't help but laugh when you interact with one. They also seem constantly annoyed at you.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Perfect. I think I'll just
take him outside, and if you can find a carrot somewhere, then he'll be nicer.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Well, bye guys. Thank you. I'm gonna take this outside.